I didn't actually know how to play guitar. I thought the game would teach me. This video obviously features spoilers for The Last of Us 1 and 2, and maybe less obviously spoilers for The Rise of Skywalker, Jurassic World, Avengers Endgame, and Game of Thrones. I have never played a harder game than The Last of Us Part 2, and I don't mean that in terms of gameplay. I had to get a refund on Cuphead when I bought it because it was so difficult I couldn't get anywhere. No, I've never played a game or experienced a story that makes harder creative decisions, deals harder punches, or drives you to accept harder truths than The Last of Us Part 2. My name is AJ, and in a sea of mixed fan responses to the emotionally devastating sequel to what I and many others consider to be one of the deepest and most transformative video game experiences ever developed, I want to talk about why this new game is just as, if not more, transformative than the first, and how I learned to love The Last of Us Part 2. If there is a main thesis statement for this game, I think it would be something like there is evil on both sides, or everyone is someone else's villain, or simply there are two sides to every story. In order to survive at all costs and protect those you love, you must make grisly choices, and that means making grislier enemies, who in the end aren't so different from you. These themes tend to come with the territory when it comes to post-apocalypse stories, and they're not even new to the Last of Us franchise, but I've never seen them executed so well and with as much depth as they were in Part 2. These brutal survivalist themes are so prominent in these kinds of stories that it wouldn't be unfair to call them cliches. You've seen them so many times that even though we don't quite live in a post-apocalyptic society yet, you kind of go on autopilot when they're communicated to you. And while I appreciate the storytelling and the characters and their struggles with their own painful decisions, functionally I don't grapple with my decision as a player to press a button and kill the surgeon. Moral grey areas are part of the package, and it's great that these characters have such realistic emotions, but in the end it's just a game, right? I think Naughty Dog were trying to give us a wake-up call with Part 2 and create an experience which transcends gameplay and immersion, to make us actually feel the pain of surviving in this world and make us truly consider that the price we pay for our actions can mean we lose everything. We're being told to take this seriously, that you can't just get away with killing a bunch of good-intentioned people because you care about another character. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and while the first game ends with this romanticised yet tragic rescue of a character at the expense of literally thousands of others, the sequel follows these ideas to their logical conclusion, a very organic portrayal of what Joel would face in the wake of his decision. I believe the nugget of genius where the story started development would have been with the decision to partially follow the daughter of Jerry, the once no-named surgeon you, the player, must murder to save Ellie at the end of Part 1. It not only creates a great justified retcon and an improvement to the experience of the first game, but it also gives Abby, who is ostensibly the villain initially, a sympathetic cause. She isn't just some other survivor or mercenary that Joel burns in the first game, she's connected to his darkest kill. And Joel pays the price for his sins. A prospect dangled in front of you all through the first game, but is inescapable and unforgiving in the second. Gone is the plot armor, gone are our expectations. Joel is killed by someone who, as much as we hate to admit it, is inarguably justified in doing so. We begin the story hating Abby along with Ellie, but Joel is Abby's Abby. And if we followed Abby and Jerry in the first game, you'd want to kill Joel too. I can absolutely relate to people being upset by this, not just because they're attached to the character, but there is an argument that it's narratively unfulfilling to end Joel's story here, and in such a brutal and sad way. Killing off main characters can run the risk of being thematically antithetical, and there are plenty of examples of unsatisfying deaths happening to incomplete character arcs which ruin a story. In real life, death can mean nothing, but in fiction, there's kinda gotta be more subtext to it. Which is why Hux's untimely death in The Rise of Skywalker was my biggest grievance with that already horrible movie, and this lady getting eaten in Jurassic World was such a bummer for audiences because karmically she did nothing wrong, and we're used to seeing deaths in the Jurassic Park series fulfill some kind of divine purpose as opposed to just the bloodlust of audiences and the filmmakers. Similarly, this is why it was so damn obvious in Game of Thrones that Jon Snow would come back from the dead in season 6, because the series had had built his character up to the point where killing him didn't really make sense. It wasn't just tragic and sad, but it also felt like it was incompatible with the story structure. He comes back in Season 6 because without him, the story wouldn't be as interesting. And in 2016, the writers of Game of Thrones cared about making the story interesting. Tony Stark's death in Avengers Endgame is one I find satisfying because he completes his character arc and is explicitly told everything will be okay as he dies, so he isn't just left wondering and unfulfilled. Joel's death, at the other end of the spectrum, is brutal and unfulfilling and horrible. But Joel's story has always been sad and tragic. It's part of the DNA of his character, as well as the storytelling language of the Last of Us universe. Joel's arc was completed in the first game. He gets plenty of time to savor his relationship with Ellie before he pays the price for the actions he took to save her. Which was confronting, but The Last of Us Part 2 isn't Joel's story, and the story it does tell is so much bigger than him. If the first game is about love, then the second is about hate. And this is a more difficult sell because hate is inherently less interesting and attractive than love. Watching an unlikely bond form is heartwarming and engrossing, where the opposite is miserable and soul-crushing. It's hard going watching a remorseless revenge story that's as tragic for the protagonists as it is for the antagonists, but that's kind of why it's so powerful and important, and I'm so glad that Naughty Dog doesn't buckle and chicken out of setting the stakes so high. Joel and Ellie can't escape these realities, so why should you be able to? If Abby and the Wolves had killed Tommy, or Ellie's revenge arc was focusing on avenging the death of Dina, as most of the marketing suggested, would you, the player, actually have cared? Would you, the player, have bought into the idea that Ellie would travel this far and risk her life just to get revenge? No, but if it's to get revenge for the death of Joel, you absolutely buy into it. The game hits you where it truly hurts, going as far as to risk turning fans against the series in order to create a transcendent experience. All of a sudden, it's not just a game anymore. All of a sudden, I'm more invested in a piece of media than I ever have been before. Now it feels like it's a part of me. Now, as a player, I grapple with pressing the buttons and attacking Ellie or Abby. Those same difficult tactics are used when it comes to Abby's side of the story too. Just as it's not easy to accept Joel's murder, it's also not easy to accept that Abby is the game's second protagonist. And look, I get it. I understand why people don't like Abby. I didn't like her to begin with either. But the way it presents both sides to you is incredible, with Abby being seemingly the last person you'd want to play as. But she's pretty much the epitome of the sympathetic villain, to the point where using that word villain to describe her feels too cheap and simple. You discover she's a flawed, not all that likable person, but you understand her motivations, which is better writing and more realistic than if she were a saint or whatever. Naughty Dog don't make it easy to forgive her, because that's the point. Not only does she torture and kill Joel, but she's rude, she's angry, she's awkward, and she willingly sabotages Owen and Mel's relationship. Do not show me her nipples, this is a video game. When you compare all her character flaws to Ellie though, what really is the difference? The only difference is that you're more attached to Ellie because you've played a whole other game with her. But both characters are killers, both are hardened, and both have suffered a tragic loss of their father figures by the hands of each other's party. I really admire Naughty Dog's decision to use Joel as more of a catalyst for the stories in this game, instead of just giving us the first game again, which probably would have satisfied a lot more people, but often the crowd-pleasing decision is not what's right for the narrative. And when you're continuing from a story that's as poignant and tragic as that first game, there's no place for playing it safe. It's different and that's scary, but it's important to explore these avenues. My favourite parts of the first game and the Left Behind DLC were the little emotional beats it lets you play through and experience. I loved getting optional dialogue prompts based on things you uncover, and I loved Ellie's wolf howl coming of age moment being a quick time event, and I was hoping for more moments like these in the sequel. And while there were a few, in the first few hours I felt like overall these aspects were lacking. But The story and places this game takes you soon eclipsed the first game entirely for me, and what I had originally wanted felt trivial in comparison to what I was getting. A heartbreaking story about loss, grief, revenge, and perspective, which ended up impacting me far more than the original game, even though it hurt. There's also still a poetry to it. If the first game is about the importance of Ellie's life, the second game is about the importance of Joel's death. My favourite thread of part 2 though is the use of this damn song, which is called Future Days by Pearl Jam, if you didn't know, which was released in 2013, and I really like the implication here that Joel was into contemporary Pearl Jam. It's with this musical motif that part 2 drives home what exactly it's saying about revenge, and those lyrics really do say it all.
If I ever were to lose you, I'd surely lose myself.
When Joel sings it to Ellie at the start, it's how he feels about her. When Ellie sings it partway through, it's about Joel. She has lost herself with the loss of him. At the end, when Ellie returns to her farmhouse to find it empty, she plays the song again, and this time it's about Dina. But it's a broken, imperfect rendition, as Ellie is now missing 2 fingers, the price she paid for seeking revenge instead of investing in what she had. She loses herself once more, now having lost Dina. Abby learns the same lesson, only a little earlier than Ellie. When Abby spares Ellie and Dina, it's because her whole story arc has been about learning of the moral grey areas between the wolves and the Seraphites, learning that heroes and villains exist on both sides. She's able to apply this understanding when facing off against Ellie, with a little prompting from Lev. She lets Ellie live because she understands the need for revenge. She understands why Ellie hates her, and so she lets her go. Maybe out of respect, maybe as a show of good faith, in the hopes of ending the cycle of violence. And it's not until Ellie is moments away from drowning Abby that she finally understands what truly haunts her. Why she has travelled so far to kill someone which in the grand scheme of things would achieve nothing. Still seeing flashes of Joel, Ellie lets Abby go, and we soon learn in that final flashback the day before Joel is killed that Ellie doesn't know if she can ever forgive him. But she says she would like to try.
I don't think I can ever forgive you for that. But I would like to try.
Ellie believes that by killing Abby, she'll set herself free, when really what she's truly haunted by is the fact that she was never able to forgive Joel before it was too late. The final moments of the game are so unapologetically tragic. Having somehow lost more now than she had at the beginning, Ellie sets out in search of Dina? Tommy? Who knows? What we're left with is not just a blanket statement that revenge is unfulfilling. Anyone can tell you that. Instead, it's a demonstration on why exactly revenge is unfulfilling. Those we hate, those we seek revenge upon, are often climbing their own mountains, killing their own enemies, and facing their own demons, and have just as much fire in their heart as you. And if you don't end the cycle, you'll lose yourself to it.